Good morning, hello and welcome. My name is Bhuvan. This is the Indian Express Explain class. Let's get started. I have three topics for your perusal. Number one, first we'll go and understand a concept from geography, southern annular mode. Okay, this directly impacts the climate, the weather of Australia. Okay, and it's an oscillation, so it serves you well to know about it. Okay, then agenda number two is to do with International Space Station that has completed 25 years. Okay, one of the few areas that you will find that international collaboration has continued in spite of, say, differences that could have arisen between the partners. So we'll seek to understand first the origin of the International Space Station. Okay, who were the first members who came together for the ISS? Thereafter, we'll seek to understand, say, the relevance of ISS. How does it help humanity? Okay, and then eventually you will realize that the International Space Station is now coming to the end of its lifetime. Okay. 2030 is supposed to be the cutoff date. And you also find that because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, there is a development insofar as the partnership is concerned. So which countries will continue? What will be the future of the International Space Station? That's agenda number two. And number three, we'll seek to understand an article from the Indian Express that speaks about farm fires. Okay, how do you go ahead and say categorize farm fires? How do you first go ahead and analyze them, capture them? What's the data set? What's the relevance? All of that coming up in the next 30 minutes. Let's get started. If you have any particular questions, doubts, you will reach out to me on my Telegram channel. I'll share the link. But meanwhile, here is, the Instagram channel. Here is the Telegram channel where you will find the entire PDF that I shall upload later this day. Okay, let's get started. So the southern annular mode. Now, if you have read any basic geography text, any basic geography book, right, you will know that these terms, say the roaring 40s, the furious 50s, right, the screaming 60s, these are quite frequently mentioned. What are they essentially? They are high speed winds, high intensity winds that are flowing in from my west to the east, right? Can I say that this mid-lats is where they would be most expected, right? So you find that the southern annular mode, right? The southern annular mode has to do a lot with these set of terms that you have heard. Satyavrata, Yathendra, your neighbor, Coder. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining. Thank you. So these roaring 40s, 50s that you all hear about, so that is to do with directly with the southern annular mode. What does it do? What does it mean? It is the non-seasonal north to south movement of these strong westerly winds. Now you will find that these winds are blowing in a continuous band. Across the earth, they are flowing in a continuous band. So the migration of this band from north to south, right, has a direct bearing on the kind of effect or the kind of climate that you could say expect over Australia. Simply put, okay, this is the definition of southern annular mode. So this belt of westerly winds is associated with storms and cold fronts. Okay. Now, if you have cold fronts, which means if you have done your frontogenesis, if you have studied your fronts, you will know that cold fronts bring rainfall. Okay. So cold fronts are essentially going to be migrating along with them, right? So if you have, for example, let's go ahead and understand it in the simplest manner. So for example, if you have case 1, in which case you have, say, these winds that are flowing here. Now, in case 2, it could be that this migration causes them to, say, flow from here. Now, straight away you will realize that along with these cold winds, you have the cold fronts that are also moving along with them. So let's assume these to be the cold fronts. So given wherever my cold front passes over, I can expect rainfall. Correct? Jaren, Arka, good morning guys. Okay. What's the direction of movement of the southern annular winds? Well, they go from west to east, right? The direction of the rotation of the earth. Okay. And so straight away you realize that wherever these winds are migrating from north to south, depending on whatever conditions, well, you can expect high rainfall or low rainfall over Australia, over certain parts of Australia. Okay. So let's go ahead and understand my southern annular mode. Now it has 3, say, phases. Okay. You can break it down into a, say, neutral phase. And then you have a positive phase and a negative phase. Okay. Now you also know that my sun is in a continuous movement, the apparent migration of the sun that we know of, right? My sun is continuously migrating between my tropics, which means, say you have your seasons. So you have, say, summer here, winter here, summer here, depending on which side my sun is. Which means Australia. Yes, we often have heard of, say, the Boxing Day test matches, India-Australia test match. So you must have observed that people are not wearing very warm clothes that time in Australia. Why is that happening? Whereas that time in December, you'll be wearing cold clothes or, say, warm clothes in India. That's again to do with the apparent migration of the sun. So what you find is that my southern annular mode, right, it behaves differently in summers and winters. Okay, and you know that each case you can have a positive or a negative southern annular mode depending on where its location is, right? If it is, say, over Australia or below Australia, I'm going to categorize it as a positive or negative. JP, Pradeepa, good morning guys. Thank you for joining so much. Thanks. So understand this, direct correlation with the apparent movement of the sun. Okay, apparent movement of the sun, as well as this leading to, say, my correlation of it being either positive or negative. Right? So let's go ahead and understand it now that you know the basics. So in winter, what happens? The usual position of the belt of this westerly winds is close to Australia. So what happens? The closer this band of winds is to Australia, which means the cold fronts are also moving over Australia. Can I say that? Right? So if it is moving over Australia, which means I can expect rainfall, that is it. You will get rainfall from cold fronts. Got it? Now, in a positive southern annular phase, what happens? Now you expect winter, you expect rainfall. But the belt of westerly winds contracts towards Antarctica. So in a positive phase, you find that it's southwards movement. Okay? In a positive SAM, you are expecting southwards movement, which means this rainfall that would have been expected over Australia is now hampered. Right? So you find weaker than normal westerly winds and thus restricting the passage of cold fronts, which means fewer rain events. Okay, so which means positive SAM during my winters causes it to migrate south, which means lesser rainfall over Australia. Here is my first algorithm. ठीक है? Kalyan, Manju, good morning guys. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Now let's look at a negative SAM. So in a positive SAM, you have southwards migration, which means in a negative SAM, you will have northwards migration. What happens then? More cold fronts, which means obviously more storm systems, more rainfall. Simply put, you have to realize that this north-south migration, if it goes south, you are looking at positive. If it goes north, it's looking at negative. Okay, negative brings more rainfall. Positive takes away rainfall from Australia. Okay, so I have tried to break it down. Here is this particular, say, figure that I've got from the Australian government website, their Bureau of Meteorology. Okay, so this breaks it down in the most comprehensive and easiest manner, in fact. So look at this. In a positive phase, which means you're looking at, right, more rainfall in the east, more east coast lows. Now, why is this happening? Why are you expecting rainfalls in the east? Because you have increased onshore flows. Your winds are now flowing in towards the coast, towards your beaches, right? So you expect more rainfall in the eastern side, whereas your southern side experiences lesser rainfall because, well, it has migrated down south. Similarly, in a negative phase, you see, now it has gone up, which means your southern side receives more rainfall and your eastern side receives less rainfall. Less onshore winds are now causing my East Australia to have lesser rainfall. Right? See, more rainfall in the southwest and southeast, less rainfall in parts of the east. Okay. Now, since they are cold fronts, which means you are looking at snowfall, that is also a possibility, especially in these alpine areas. Why not? Absolutely. So you will have, say, south part of Australia or New Zealand, right? That will receive consistent precipitation in the form of snowfall. Bulbul, good morning. Easy, right? So this is the southern annular mode in winter. Now let's look at it in summer, right? So in summer, what happens? Like in winter, it is supposed to be little northwards. In summer, it is now further south of Australia, right? The more south, the more away from land it is, well, the less common and the more cold fronts, well, you can't expect it anymore. No more cold fronts, right? So your South Australia is essentially going to have less rainfall. But then at the same time, your East Australia, to compensate for this, will have more onshore winds. And thus, you can expect some amount of rainfall in the eastern coast. Okay. Now you can break it down again into negative SAM phase and positive SAM phase. You always know this now, right? In a negative SAM phase, you are going to experience southwards migration of this band of wind. So the more away from Australia it is, the less rainfall it gets. Okay. The more closer it is towards Australia, well, the more rainfall it will get. But will the rainfall be uniform? For example, if you are asked this question, okay. For example, if you are asked this question that, well, here it is, this is Australia for you. And in this case, what you find is that your cold fronts, your westerlies are supposed moving here, right? So in this case, obviously you know that, say, this part will receive less rainfall. But why? Well, one reason is that as my cold fronts are moving, right, they are causing precipitation, and by the time they reach the eastern part of Australia, well, the precipitation intensity has reduced. There is less moisture, which means obviously lesser rainfall. Obviously. Second reason being, you have more onshore winds coming in. Sorry, lesser onshore winds. Yes, lesser onshore winds, which means again lesser rainfall. Got it? Simply put, this is the southern annular mode. Now, try to think this in conjunction with, say, your El Nino or your La Nina. Okay. How does, because a good question, or if I really wanted to frame a very difficult question, which I have today, which you will find, okay, is to go ahead and include this as you prepare for, say, your effects of El Nino, your La Nina, your Enzo, your IOD, okay, your Modoki. So based on a combination of this, so for example, if I ask you, say, what happens during El Nino plus positive IOD, and say you are experiencing negative SAM during summer. Okay. What would the effect of this be on rainfall over Australia? You realize how complicated questions can easily become. But then the best way to remember them is what? So when you discuss, say, the Southern Pacific, the Walker cell circulation between Southern America and, say, Australia. Okay. One way to remember it is that, well, the higher low pressure you have, the more intense low pressure created over Australia that you have, right, the more intense rainfall you will have. Okay. And so in an El Nino event, what you find is that your low pressure here is compromised. Your low pressure here is in fact less. Yes, relatively it is less. So what happens in that case? Lesser rainfall. Now, what happens in an IOD, in an Indian Ocean dipole? So you have a positive IOD and a negative IOD. What do you do here? You compare the sea surface temperature of Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. Right? The warmer sea surface temperature is more conducive for tropical cyclones, which will aid the onset of the Indian monsoon. Correct? So you link it to masculine high. Now, if these are completely new terms for you, okay, may I suggest go ahead and, well, firstly understand the process of Walker cell circulation and then the process of the onset of Indian monsoons. Okay, because this is one of the most key concepts insofar as geography for UPSC is concerned. Right? So what I want you to do is go ahead and include your SAM for this type of flowcharts. Right? If in case you are asked such kind of questions where you are asked to analyze the impact of multiple events on one particular place, well, you should be absolutely aware about how each of them function. Got it? Okay. right? So this is your typical impact in a positive phase and in a negative phase. Simply put, you will understand that in a negative phase, you are looking at southwards migration, and in a positive phase, you are looking at northwards migration. Okay, right? Let's look at these questions, my friends. You will leave your answers for me in the comment box after the class ends. Okay, we'll discuss the correct answers in the Monday class. Southern oscillation mode is associated with which of the following? Arctic oscillation, Pacific gyres, temperate cyclones, Antarctic oscillation. And question number 2, El Nino and positive IOD, La Nina and negative IOD, and El Nino Modoki and negative southern annular mode during summer. Which of the above leads to less than normal rainfall over Australia? Okay, give it a shot. It's something that will require you to go ahead and say probably draw 1 or 2 figures before you arrive at the answer. But then this will help you revise multiple concepts in one go. Okay, right? Let's look at the second topic that I have for you. Meanwhile, before I go forward very quickly, if you liked the discussion, if you understood what southern annular mode is all about, if you understood the north-south migration of these westerly winds, yes, do consider leaving me a like. It'll be of immense encouragement to me, and I'd greatly appreciate that. Okay, right? Let's look at this question now. This topic: 25 years of the International Space Station. Why was it launched, and well, what exactly does it do? Right, so just a couple of days ago, on the 20th of November, the ISS completed 25 years of service to humanity. Okay, it is the largest modular space station in the low Earth orbit, the satellite-rich low Earth orbit that exists. Well, ISS is a part of that. It's quite a huge body, by the way, close to 110 meters by 110 meters. It's a huge body, which means one obvious connotation that you should straight away realize is that it should have to deal with the problem of space debris. Yes, you know that your low Earth orbit is satellite rich. It's full of satellites, big and small. Nowadays, you even have educational institutions that go ahead and engage in this, rightly so. But then that leads to the problem of space debris, which means your premier agency, your premier guardian up in the sky is also having to deal with this. And please realize that at that height, with that amount of kinetic energy, even a 1 gram object or a 2 gram object can cause a dent of up to 6 to 7 inches. 6 to 7 inches of dent can be caused by a 1 gram object. So you need to have that in consideration when you understand the problem that the LEO faces, that even the International Space Station is having to deal with that, right? The impact of even a minor most halka object can also cause a lot of issues. Now, so what was the story of ISS? So you had 5 premier organizations that came together. Okay, you had the Americans, the Russians, the Japanese, the Europeans, and the Canadians. Their space agencies all came together, collaboration. Which is why I started this class by saying that, well, this is one of the most premier examples of collaboration for humanity. Okay, of international collaboration for humanity. This is one of the most important examples, because what you find is that in spite of, say, geopolitical differences that might have arisen on the ground, nations have gone ahead and continued their commitment towards the International Space Station. Okay, and please realize again, it's a massive body, 110 meters by 110 meters roughly, 109 meters actually, the actual figure. Okay, so now what does it do? Right, it's a huge thing, it's of immense importance to us, but why is it important? So, what you realize is that it serves as a microgravity and space environment research lab. What is microgravity? Well, you're experiencing lesser than usual normal gravity. And so you use that environment to test a lot of things. Not just say how the human body reacts under microgravity. So you are much more prone to experience muscle loss, muscle atrophy. Okay. You also go ahead and try to find out whether any kind of life can exist in that type of hard environment. So, if I ask you this question, okay, does life exist in space? Many of you may be tempted to say, well, no, life does not exist in space. But then, research aboard the ISS has confirmed to humanity that you are looking at something called extremophiles. Okay. These sets of living beings, they are able to adapt themselves in extreme environments. So it could be extreme pH, it could be extreme salinity, or extreme radiation, extreme heat, extreme pressure, any of the variabilities that you know of. Okay, you have bacteria or say the primary form of life that might exist in those situations. The research of the last 25 years that the ISS has conducted tells us that. You see why it is important now. Okay, and you also find that scientific research is conducted in astrobiology, astronomy, meteorology, physics, other fields. You are looking at, well, one of the most important jobs that the ISS has is to do deep space research. Okay, and it serves as our eye in the sky, if you know of. Yes, it's again crossing the earth. You can almost watch it from the naked eye if you are careful enough, and obviously if you don't stay in Delhi, then you should be able to spot the ISS pretty easily, right? Okay, let's go ahead and understand the history of the International Space Station. Okay, so what you find is, again, the first two that came together were the Russians and the United States together. Okay, in 1998, long after say the Cold War had ended, the two adversaries of the Cold War came together for humanity. And the Russians went first. The Zarya control module, which was responsible for the fuel and other supply sets. Okay, the fuselage was provided by the Russians. The Americans came up with their own contribution. Since then, multiple space flights have been taken to build this brick by brick, almost brick by brick. Okay, and then you have, say, the most important part is that it has been continuously inhabited since then. What does that mean? That people have been aboard it continuously. Not even one day has passed when a human has not been on the ISS so far, since its inception. Okay, and not just astronauts. Nowadays, you find that space tourists also. Movies have been shot inside the ISS. Okay, I forget the name of the movie, but if you Google it, you'll find the name of the movie. Movies have been shot inside the ISS. Okay, so impact of microgravity on human bodies, agenda number 1. Okay, space research leading to Earth use products. So much we know about, say, our drug development, our water filtration. One common misconception is that the UV glasses that we wear, Ray-Ban, owes its origin to the space station. Unfortunately, no. That first came in the Air Force, because the pilots used to have to deal with the glare at the high altitude. And say the black and blue hue would almost disorient them, which is why you had Ray-Ban and all of those fancy glasses that came. It wasn't because of the space. That's a common misconception. But then so many others owe their origin to research that was being primarily done for, say, the astronauts, and that found, say, human application. Okay, and then you find, say, water filtration, muscle atrophy solutions. Why muscle atrophy solutions? Because you are going to experience microgravity there, right? Lesser than usual gravity, so your body behaves differently, right? Okay, so what happens after 2030? Very key now. Yes, Bharatiya Antariksha Station by 2035. Yathendra, you are absolutely correct. In fact, that's on the agenda after our Gaganyaan mission is done. Okay, our Gaganyaan is priority number 1. After that, you will find that we are looking at the Bharat Antariksha Station. Okay, K7, the ISRO chairperson, had announced this. Okay, so let's look at what happens to the International Space Station after 2030. Now, obvious connotation. The 5 partners, the 2 primary partners are Russia and the United States. Now, their relationship is strained because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Okay, and what you find is that this mistrust that has developed on the ground is now playing out in space. Okay, and other countries are now sensing an opportunity. You find recently that China has gone ahead and launched its own space station, the Tiangong. Okay, it's almost 1/3 the size of the ISS, but it's a commendable step. Why? Because you have for the first time a nation that has gone ahead and done so. That is not a part of this coterie. Okay, and you find suddenly that Russia and USA are not very, say, trusting of each other anymore. You also find that the European Space Agency and national bodies have withdrawn collaboration with Russia. So the shining example of international collaboration for humanity, for science, it is not shining anymore. Okay, and you find that NASA has now shifted its focus. So you have the Artemis Accords recently signed that plans to put humans back to the moon. That human-based moon exploration will soon become a reality again. And at the same time, you find that NASA is now lot more keener on introducing and involving the private sector. Okay. You have had the NASA director and NASA representatives say that private ownership of a space station could be a reality in the coming future. They are looking to divest almost their responsibilities to the private sector. Okay. And you find that Russia has announced that it is leaving the ISS. A big space, in the space race, here you have a vacuum getting created almost. Right? So Russia has said, well, we'll leave by 2035, 2038, the date is yet to be confirmed, but that is guaranteed that they are not going to be a part of it anymore. So there could be a fair chance that if the ISS is decommissioned by say 2030 or 35, before say the next version of the International Space Station comes up, yes, you are looking at a possibility that Tiangong of the Chinese could be the only international space station. Okay, European Space Agency has got its Star Lab, that is also in the process. India has announced the Bharatiya Antariksha Space Mission. Okay, that has been announced, correct? The Bharatiya Antariksha Station, correct? Okay, so this is where we are standing. This actually makes for a very important point that so far as international diplomacy goes, the times are changing as the song goes. Earlier, in spite of say various push and pulls, countries were almost firm in their commitment when it came to the International Space Station space collaboration. But now that plays out on the ground also. So it's a departure from the usual. Okay. Right. Let's look at this question, my friends. The International Lunar Research Station. Who is planning this mission? Russia, China, North Korea, both A and B. And these are the treaties, by the way, the Outer Space Treaty, Rescue Agreement, Moon Treaty, Artemis Accords. Which of the above is India part of? Okay, let me tell you about each of them very quickly. Okay, just to clear it out for you. So what is the Outer Space Treaty? It is nothing but the principles that will govern the activities of each of the states, right, who are going to use outer space, which means it's a spacefaring nations specific treaty. Okay. Spacefaring nations specific treaty. So those nations that go ahead into outer space, right, what should their behavior be like, what is allowed, what is not allowed, the finer points. Okay. Rescue agreement. So what happens if something goes wrong during this space mission? Okay, who is responsible for the rescue of the astronauts, the return of the astronauts, right? The return of the objects that you could have launched, right? So that rescue agreement is that international treaty that governs that behavior of the states during a rescue mission. Okay. Now what is a Moon Treaty? Well, simply put, it is an agreement that governs the activities of the states on Moon plus other celestial bodies. Now it is a very controversial agreement, by the way. Okay, very controversial agreement, and you find that not many countries have signed it. Okay, so go ahead and read about the Moon Treaty, and more importantly, see whether India is a part of it. Okay, and when I say part of it, it means two things: that it should be signed and it should be ratified. Only then do you consider a particular nation to be a part of an international or committed to an international treaty. Okay, so this is the necessary precondition. When the question mentions part of, it has to necessarily include both of these processes. Okay, and Artemis Accords, well, India has signed it or ratified it or both. Okay, this is question number 4 for you. Right. Moving on in 60 seconds or less. 24th of November is today, and today is the day in just what, 50 minutes from now. Not 50 minutes, how much time? Okay, 15 minutes from now. You will have the English batch that will start. Okay, the next English batch. We have received incredible response from the student community in previous batches. Okay, students of previous batches have been associated with me insofar as geography and CSAT is concerned. I will also be taking care of their environment for them. Okay, and so you will find that we have gone ahead in a structured manner that includes not just understanding a concept, but making sure that you have the adequate question solving ability. Okay, that's my focus here too in the morning, as you find that after every topic I make sure necessarily to give you questions to solve, right? And this is the strategy adopted by my esteemed my friends here, my colleagues here, my faculty friends here who take care of the other subjects for you. And this is this entire hand-holding process from say prelims, then mains, interview, obviously you have the ex-bureaucrats and civil servants who come ahead and coach you, okay, give you that extra edge that is needed, shape your outlook, shape your public communication skills, right? Make sure that you don't end up, doing something stupid in front of the interview board that undoes all of the hard work of the previous year. So many crucial facets that come together in the selection of a candidate, right? And so if you are able to take care of them by yourself, my best wishes are with you. But if you think that you need help, if you need a bit of guidance, I would suggest get associated with the Prelims to Interview program, okay? Use the code BALIVE. Why? More importantly for you, yes, you get a good discount to go ahead and treat yourself to a good samosa or a chai later. But more importantly, from my perspective, you get allotted to my batch and we get to go ahead and get started with the subjects that I just mentioned. Okay. So I hope many of you consider joining the Prelims to Interview initiative. And if you are not, well, my best wishes are always with you, regardless of that. Okay. The last topic for the day from the Indian Express Explain page. How farm fires are counted. Okay. So firstly, who does it? Farm fires, huh? You find it has been in the news whenever you read about air quality index. One of the causes that is attributed is farm fires. Okay. And you find daily data is put out by the government. So who does it? How is it done? What's the relevance of the data? Very important for you to know. Okay. First, let's look at who collects the data. The Indian Agricultural Research Institute's Consortium for Research on Agro-Ecosystem Modeling. Okay. So essentially the IARI is the responsible entity for the collection of this data. Now, which states is it specific to? Punjab, Haryana, UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Delhi. Right? So these states are targeted. You have a district-wise breakdown of the number of farm fire recorded incidents. Okay. So the 5 states, Punjab, Haryana, okay, we are looking at UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Delhi. 6 states. Okay. Now this lab was set up in 2013. Okay. And you find that, well, this is to complement the government's policy of making sure that the crop residue management policy is in place. It complements those efforts. Okay. Now, here is the more key bit for you from this discussion. How is the data collected? So do you have an ISRO-backed space entity that does it? No. You find that 3 sensors about 3 different NASA satellites are the ones that Government of India uses. Okay. So you have the VIRS about the Suomi NPP satellite, and then the 2 others are called MODIS. Okay. And so the NASA's satellites data is given to the Government of India. Data is then collated district-wise and then published for the different state governments as well as for the consumption of the public. Okay. So which area do they scan? Right from, say, your Indian Ocean up until your Ladakh region is the entire area that is scanned for farm fires, but data is collated for those 6 states only. Okay. Now, how are paddy fires identified? So how do you go ahead? You are looking at heat signatures. Okay. That is all you are looking at. You are looking at heat signatures, which are nothing but, say, your IR-backed data, your IR heat-backed data. Okay. Infrared-backed data is essentially heat signatures. Okay. So you identify the areas under paddy cultivation, then you go ahead and heat signature that place. You see, paddy has a different reflectance signature describing how much light is reflected from a surface. And this is that signature that is measured. So you go ahead and identify the type of heat signature that a paddy, when it is burnt, it emits. And then you go ahead and capture those particular heat signatures and you come up with a data. Okay, this number of farm fires were observed in this district, in this state. And all of that information is then compiled, collated and published. Okay. Now, why is the fire intensity recorded? So one key thing that is recorded here is fire intensity. So what you find? That the more material that you are burning, simple common sense guys, look at this. If you are given a particular, say, bunch of papers, if you are given one paper, it burns lesser, the flame produced is lesser. But if I give you like a ton of loose sheets and if I ask you to burn it, the flame will be quite higher, which means the heat signature is higher. Same concept here, right? more the residue burnt, higher the increase in temperature. And thus you find that fire intensity, how intense the fire is, will be higher. This is what the entire point is, to capture the fire intensity data also. Okay, how do you go ahead and measure it? Per unit area, how much of energy is related in per unit time, right? So you go ahead, your sensors about the 3 NASA satellites are able to capture heat signatures as well as the intensity of the fire. Okay, then you prepare your bulletin and you circulate it to central and state level agencies. Okay, as much as up till the district administration, everyone gets a copy. Why? Because again, you need data. You need to have data so that you can prepare an action plan. How do you combat a problem if you do not know which areas to target? Similar as to what you do, same as you do. For example, you might be scoring well in geography, but you don't score well in, say, art and culture, right? So how do you get your data? By solving MCQs, by solving, say, multiple mocks. Then you go ahead and figure out that, okay, I need to focus on my art and culture. Same way, you have the data that is provided by the IARI lab, okay, and then you figure out that, okay, X district in Y state is where you're experiencing the most amount of farm fires. Go ahead, figure out what's wrong there. How can we further minimize it? Take an action step to mitigate the problem. Okay. So what are the data limitations? Now I told you, because you're experiencing and capturing heat signatures, which means your level of cloudiness, your weather conditions directly affect how effective my capturing method is. Okay. At the same time, what you find is that the limited number of satellites are in operation. You're looking at 3 satellites as of now. Okay, which means by the time they go ahead and complete one revolution around the Earth, so you need more satellites, which means you're able to capture real-time data at all times, continuous intervals, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Bring down that time interval as far as possible, which means you'll be able to capture more farm fires, which means better accurate data, right? So this is one problem. Cloudiness, weather patterns can change, which will impede you to capture the data set. That is also there. Okay, right? Let's look at this question very quickly now. How many of the above are included under the definition of disaster in India, right? So you will find, say, under the prelims to interview initiative, we have our disaster management classes that are to be held. Okay, for those of you who have been associated with me previously, that's going to happen, say, in the month of December, right? We will capture the end-to-end of disaster management, right? From, say, the types of disasters, how you can avoid them, adapt to them, mitigate to them, right? Who provides compensation, if at all, right? What are the agencies that are responsible for disaster management in India? What are the challenges that are facing? What are the opportunities that they have? Okay, very, very important again from the mains perspective. So let's go ahead and answer this question. Lightning strike, air accident, poor air quality, avalanche. Which of the above are included under the definition of disaster in India? Okay, how many in fact? So 1 only, 2 only, 3 only, or all 4 are included under the definition of disaster in India, right? Of late you must have heard that the state of Odisha, it was struck by close to 60,000 lightning strikes, right? So you must have asked yourself this question first. If you went through this article, 2 things that you must have asked yourself, or you should have asked yourself if you are an empathetic candidate. Number 1, first you should have considered, well, how does lightning happen? Exactly what causes lightning to happen? And secondly, well, what happens to the people? Because eventually lightning strikes on the ground where people reside. So is it a disaster or not? Firstly, what is the way the compensation is provided? Okay, what is the way in which can be avoided, or can it be avoided? How can you minimize losses that come out of lightning strikes, human losses, right? All those questions would quickly spring in your mind whenever you read an article like that. Okay, just reading an article is not enough. Interpreting the article is more important. Okay, right? Let's look at the questions of yesterday, my friends. So yesterday we discussed Sant Mirabai Janmotsav. Okay, so Bhaktamal, the primary text that continues to have, that has all the information about the prominent saints of the Bhakti movement. Okay, gives an account of various Bhakts of the Bhakti movement, written in Braj Bhasha, absolutely true. And it was written by Nabha Das, is absolutely true. All 3 statements are correct here. Okay. With reference to Nirguna ideological thought, we discussed the difference yesterday between Nirguna and Saguna. Okay, 2 ideological thoughts of the Bhakti movement. Okay, if you haven't got the difference yet, may I suggest, look at yesterday's class. It will clear out a lot of basic concepts for you. So they emphasized on a God which was beyond all forms, true, beyond all forms, beyond all attributes. This is what the Nirguna movement stood for. They rejected practice of idolatry, they rejected the prevalent social order. They were essentially what you can say the reactionary group, the reformists that came up. This is true too. They rejected the supremacy of the caste system, absolutely true. And you find that, well, Kabir was a Nirguna, okay, but Tulsidas and Chaitanya were Sagunas, okay. So your incorrect statement has been asked is C, right? Okay, Molai Forest, simply Jadav Payeng. I had uploaded a question on my Telegram channel a couple of days ago on riverine islands, and I found one thing that many students tend to go ahead and ignore this, or their knowledge is just limited to Majuli, which is fine. But then there are many other riverine islands, okay, not just on river Brahmaputra. You also find in the Sundarban area, you find on Narmada river, okay. So many islands exist. You ought to have a basic idea of at least all of them, okay. So Molai Forest, Jadav Payeng is the person, the forest man of India, who went and planted trees on a sandbar of river Brahmaputra, okay, and that area has now gone ahead and will become a full-fledged forest, okay. So this is correct. Umananda is also on Brahmaputra, by the way. So Brahmaputra has three major riverine islands that you should be aware of. Number one is obviously what you know, Majuli, okay. Then you are looking at Umananda, and then you have this third addition, that is the Molai Forest, which is been done by Jadav Payeng, okay. So this is incorrect. Mandhata is on Narmada. You also have Kabirwad, okay, which is also a riverine island on Narmada. Your famous Jyotirling of, if I'm not wrong, Omkareshwar is on Mandhata riverine island. Sure. Right, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. So the incorrectly matched here is. Just a second. Right. So the incorrectly matched here being only C. Okay. Narmada river flows from the west. This is a CSE pre-question from the year 2013. Now I had asked you yesterday the difference of cause and effect here. Okay. Simple things you have to focus on. Why is the river flowing, say, from my east to west? It is because it is flowing through a rift valley. Simple reason, right? Now, whether it flows between the Vindhyas or Satpuras, that's not relevant to the answer. What is relevant is that it straight away, it occupies a linear rift valley. Okay. So your answer here being only A. Simple question, right? So disputes, disputes in the year 2023. A PDF of this is going to be uploaded soon on my Telegram channel. Make sure you access it. Okay, it will have the information about all of the disputes, the disputed regions at least, insofar as 2023 is concerned. Okay, so the Rafah border crossing in the news because of the Israel-Palestine crisis. Which two countries or which two regions is it a part of? Is it joining? Okay, so you find that it's a part of Gaza, Egypt border. Okay, the Limtaco Gurma region, well, it lies on the border of the three regions, three countries here, which are a part of the Sahel region of Northern Africa. Okay, so your answer is D. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are a part of the Liptako Gurma region. Again, a region that has been in a dispute. You have seen several violence, a lot of violence that has been observed here. Harshita, good morning to you too. How are you? Welcome, welcome. Okay. So these are my good friends, my individuals who have gone ahead and answered the questions and answered correctly at that. Crystal, Studying Raccoon, Neeraja, Pooja, Harshit, Mandeep Bhai, Satyabrata, Koda, Akhil, Manoj, Aditya, Gatsu, Vidit, Abhishek, Rahul, Akshay and Ayush. Well done, guys. Excellent job. Okay. 30 minutes, 35 minutes of lecture followed by 5-6 questions is the best way to start your morning. Okay. So to the rest of you who will be watching this or who are watching this live and who will watch this later, go ahead and answer the questions of today too. Okay. It'll help aid close the knowledge gap insofar as these topics are concerned. Okay. And on that note, I'll wrap this class. May I request you once again to leave me a like, and if there is any feedback for me, any particular feedback in terms of improvement, praise, bouquets, brickbats, well, you go ahead and connect with me on my Instagram channel, or you can leave a comment for me in the comment box. Till I see you in the next class on Monday morning at 7 a.m. This is Bhuvan for Study IQ IAS saying bye-bye. Have a good, productive weekend.